If you love your beer, whiskey, and or those hearty German and Russian dark breads, then you're really gonna love the grain that we are exploring for this month in October 2024 for our Grains Explorer Challenge. And that is another ancient grain, and it is rye. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. I teach you all about milling your own wheat, baking with whole grains, using them in your kitchen, using real whole foods, all the things. So if that's your jam, be sure to subscribe, like this video, all the things. So this is actually another video here in October for our Grains Explorer Challenge for 2024. And fun fact, I'm actually filming this while Hurricane Helene is bearing down on us here in Florida. But the show must go on. That's how much I love you guys. So we're hurricane prepping, but I gotta film this video. And I'm really hoping that I don't look back on this and think, wow, if we only knew. So praying for all my Floridians out there and praying that by the time this video comes out that we will recover and everything will be fine. Okay, so if you're new, our Grains Explorer Challenge is a challenge that we have going on here for 2024 where we are challenging ourselves to use a new grain each and every month. And so this month is rye. And if you want to catch up on other grains that we have covered so far, then be sure to check out this playlist up here. Anyone can join this challenge, but to receive the full adventure, that is for my Grainy Bunch. You know I love you, my Grainies. Y'all are awesome. And they receive extra recipes, Zoom hangouts every month. We have a lot of fun. And so be sure to check that out. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/grainsexplorer in order to check out all the details with this Grains Explorer Challenge. And you can sign up for the Grainy Bunch while you're there as well. Now, as always, here's what we will cover in this video. 1, we will cover the history and overview of rye. Number 2, the nutritional benefits. Number 3, all the uses that rye can be used for. And number 4, my favorite ways to use rye in my kitchen, how to use rye, and ideas that I'm going to be trying out myself this month in October. Before we begin, comment below. Have you ever used rye before? What are your favorite things to use rye for? What do you think about it? Are you going to be trying it this month yourself? Let me know in the comments below. All right, first up, the history and overview of rye. Now, in case you didn't know, rye is definitely part of the same type of cereal grains and very closely related to wheat and barley. And it is very much an ancient grain, but being an ancient grain does not mean that it's gluten-free. This is definitely a gluten grain, although the gluten is a bit different and it's not gonna be as much of a rise as wheat. Now, as far as the origins of rye, this is kind of a bit of a controversy, but pretty much they have settled that the origins of rye is from modern day Turkey. And the main reason that this is kind of up for debate is because unlike wheat and barley and other type of grains, it's actually difficult to determine whether this rye grain is domesticated or if it's the wild rye grain. The wild rye and the domesticated rye are actually very, very similar and barely change at all. So when archaeologists are looking back and they find rye grain in archaeological sites, it's kind of hard to tell if it's just wild grain that has come in or if they were actually domesticating and growing this rye. So we don't really have a lot of history as far as ancient times go, but we do know come by the Middle Ages that rye was definitely starting to become more popular. And it mainly gained that popularity due to its ability to be grown in poor soil, such as sandy soil, and also in cold climates as well. And in fact, rye can actually be grown today as far north as the Arctic Circle and in high altitudes, poor conditions where you can't really do that with wheat and barley as well. Come the 12th and 13th centuries, rye definitely became a very popular grain in modern day Central Europe. And it actually was still the main grain of Germany until after World War II. Now today we actually have what is known as the rye belt. And this is where most of the rye in the world is grown. And the rye belt, as you can see here on this map, is predominantly grown in North and Eastern Europe. For example, Germany, Poland, the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, Belarus, Ukraine, Austria, Czech Republic, and Slovakia. Now, we also do grow some of the rye here in the United States and also in Canada. So most likely if you're buying over here on across the pond, across the Atlantic Ocean, you probably will be buying grains grown here in the US and Canada because it's here and it's cheaper. So you can always tell that whenever you're buying rye grain, it usually tells you where it is originated from. I did check Azure Standard, for example, and their rye is sourced from the US and Canada. Now, another fun fact is because wheat and rye and barley are all so closely related, they actually did come up with a hybrid grain, which is a mix of wheat and rye. So they took wheat and rye and they hybridized them into what is known as Triticale, which is something that you can purchase. So you might have seen this out whenever you've gone to buy grains and wondered what Triticale is. And all that is a hybrid between wheat and rye. Now, rye, of course, is not as popular as your typical wheat. And in fact, as far as all these type of cereal grains go in the world, only 3% of the population of this wheat family, only 3% is actually rye. So it's a very small percentage. It's not as popular, but still a great grain. Now, one downside to rye is it is actually very susceptible to a fungus known as ergot. And this actually created a problem. And this is not cool. Like if your rye becomes infected with ergot, you don't want it because it can cause death. It can also cause gangrene in the fingers and in the toes, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches. It ain't good. It is not cool. And in fact, it was such a problem that back in the Middle Ages, they would frequently have pandemics because the rye grain was being infected with this fungus and people were dying. In fact, it was known as St. Anthony's fire, which you may have heard of before, and it was no good. No good at all. But good news, due to screening methods today, it actually is very rare because modern technology, we have gotten better at screening these grains to make sure that the rye is not infected with this fungus. But just know that today it is called ergotism. Ergotism. That is the name of it if you do somehow get rye that's infected with this. It can also be found in wheat and barley as well. It's not just to rye. Rye is more susceptible to this. So just know, buy from reputable sources. Make sure your grains are clean, and you should be just fine. Okay, so next up, the nutritional benefits of rye. And again, if you already know the benefits of typical wheat and barley and or whole grains in general, it's pretty much the same. Rye is very high in fiber. It is rich in those B vitamins and the trace minerals such as iron, manganese, phosphorus, and selenium. The protein content is around 15%. But as usual, it's a whole grain. So if you're eating it in its whole grain form, which most of the time, rye flour, if you buy the rye flour, most likely it is in more of a whole grain form. But of course, here on this channel, I always say you should be milling it yourself whole and intact, and at least consuming the rye berries whole and intact the way the good Lord intended. But it is still a very nutritious grain, just like wheat and barley and our other beloved whole grains. Now the fun part, what rye is used for. And this is one of those grains that have a ton of uses. Now, obviously, it is used in our beloved dark breads. Those are your pumpernickels, your dark Russian rye breads. And of course, we know it more in the United States. Over here, the Westernized, they lightened it up for us, where they usually mix it in with some wheat to make it a lighter bread, but that's where you still get your typical rye breads that are a bit whiter on that side. So it's a very common bread. I'm sure we've all had a turkey sandwich on rye at a deli or something like that. So these are wonderful. And fun fact, the dark breads, those dark pumpernickels, those dark Russian ryes are actually my husband's favorite type of bread. And I do not make it enough. I will be making it today. After this video, I'm going to make one for him. And I'm also making a German potato salad because he wants a German beer to go with it. And so I'm going to be making him that today. But every time I make it, he always says I don't make it enough. So gonna make it, but that's actually his favorite types of bread. Now, other uses is like wheat and barley. You know, fermented drinks have been made from rye. This includes beers like the Roggen beer in Germany, which is made about 60% of rye. It's Bavarian craft beer. There's also a Finnish beer made with rye called Sati. I hope I pronounced that right. And then there's also kvass, which if you have the Nourishing Traditions cookbook by Sally Fallon, the Weston A. Price Foundations, you may have heard of beet kvass, which is made from beets, but there also is just kvass, the traditional drink that is made by fermenting rye bread, which I will admit, I'm probably never going to try. Like, yeah, full disclosure, probably not going to try that one myself. If I do, I might leave it to the professionals, but I don't think I'm going to try that one. But if you do have the Nourishing Traditions cookbook, that is actually on page 595 if you would like to try it yourself. There's also some Japanese craft beers that use rye, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce those because I will butcher that. And of course, some whiskeys and vodkas are also made from rye grain as well. Other uses is, of course, our animal feeds. You're probably very familiar with this if you purchase animal feed. Rye is a very popular one. Rye is also used as a cover crop. And in fact, if you live in farm country and you see something like wheat grown, but maybe wheat isn't grown in your area, it actually may be rye. It's a very popular cover crop because it has roots that go deep and stay tight together. So it's an excellent way to keep your soil healthy. And in fact, I've seen it grown around here in Florida myself. And with that, it is a good soil improvement by just tilling that into the ground. It helps amend the soil. Other uses is the tough fiber straw of rye is used in thatches, hats, mattresses, and paper. Rye is also used in wallpaper, corrugated packaging materials, and plywood. In fact, rye flour is used as an adhesive in the production of those type of goods. There's also one in the chemical world. I'm going to have to look at my notes, and that is furfural. Furfural. Here it is on the screen. And it's a pinosan component of rye, and it's used to make furfural, which is a starting material for many industrial chemicals. And again, just very, very versatile grain. You can, of course, just make up some rye and just cook up some rye and eat it whole. Just many, many uses for rye. Which leads us to the final one, is how I like to use rye in my kitchen and what I will be doing this month for this challenge when it comes to rye. Now, I'm not crafting any beers around here, and I'm also not starting my own distillery, although that would be super cool, not doing that. So my use of rye is predominantly bread related. As I mentioned, my husband loves the dark breads. And if you have Sue Becker's Home Ground Flour Cookbook, I do recommend the Black Russian Rye bread that is found on page 156. I still want to kind of see about tweaking this recipe a little bit, but ultimately that is a good recipe. My husband absolutely loves this bread, and so do my kids. It's just really, really good if you're wanting those dark breads. It is delicious. I also have yet to actually get a good typical rye bread down. So I would like to try that this month. That is something that you can do as well. And if I figure it out, I will certainly share the recipes. I also would like to do the Outback Steakhouse pumpernickel style bread using 100% freshly milled wheat and rye. So I want to do that as well. I have some recipes to try. I believe Michael Gropp has a recipe for that. So if she does, I will link it down below, put it up here on the screen if I can, so you can check that out while I'm experimenting with it as well. Now, one thing that I was seeing that I haven't tried is that you can roll rye like you do oats. I'm pretty sure I can do that. I was seeing where some you have to heat it up, which I don't have the ability to do, and then do that. So I kind of want to experiment with rolling the rye grains, because it makes a very popular porridge, or adding it into oats, kind of making that a bit different. Now, if you're just wanting to cook rye grain, because you can just cook up the rye wheat berries and add it into salads, or if you want to use it in a soup or something like that, here's the ratio up here on the screen. And the ratio is generally 4 parts water to 1 part of the whole rye wheat berries. So if you soak it overnight, then these will take about 45 minutes to an hour to cook. If you do not soak it, then it can take 2 to 3 hours to actually cook up these grains. So like any grain, throw it in some boiling water. When it gets to boil, then simmer it until it's cooked. I mean, no need to overthink this. So I have to go and make up this Russian rye bread for supper tonight, get started on that potato salad. But that is rye. So let me know if you learned anything new. Check out the past videos that we have done. There's a whole playlist with all the grains so you can catch up on. And then check it out, grainsandgrit.com/grains explorer challenge to all my grainies. Be on the lookout for those extra recipes coming your way. And as always, I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.